Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Sky DeFi channel, and today the topic of this video is going to focus on the International Monetary Fund, and more specifically why the IMF is freaking out about the rise of crypto around the world. In a new agreement with Argentina which took place in March 2022, the IMF has just demanded that the Argentine government restrict the use of cryptocurrencies by its population. In this video, we will quickly summarize the situation and its implications, and we will see how the actions of the IMF under the pretext of bringing economic stability around the world have mostly resulted in the impoverishment and enslavement of countries one by one for decades. And finally, we will see what cryptocurrencies represent, and especially what Bitcoin represents is very scary to IMF. A quick note before we start: 3 times a week, new videos on decentralized finance and cryptocurrencies are published, so feel free to subscribe and press the bell for notifications. One more note: this video should not be considered as a financial investment. This video only has an educational value to bring you more elements on the importance of cryptocurrencies on our daily lives, so take time to do your own research as well. Now with that said, let's move on to the topic of this video without further ado. So what happened in Argentina in March 2022? And why is the IMF looking to slow down the rise of crypto? The first thing to understand is that Argentina is a country in great economic difficulty, with annual inflation rates between 25 and 50% per year for so many years. In 2004, you could buy an Argentine peso with 30 cents of dollars, and today it is worth only 0.8 cents of dollars. With the population desperately struggling to protect itself from the inflation of the Argentine peso, it is no wonder that Argentina has become one of the countries where the population uses cryptocurrencies the most. In fact, in 2021, Argentina was ranked 4th in the list of countries that use cryptocurrencies the most, with 16% of the population already using them to protect themselves against inflation. In May 2022, the Argentine government, which is indebted to the IMF to the tune of more than $45 billion, sought to renegotiate the terms of its debt, except that among the conditions of the renegotiation, the IMF could impose the following condition. In order to further preserve financial stability, the government will take significant measures to discourage the use of cryptocurrencies with the aim of preventing money laundering, informality, and disintermediation. In fact, in exchange for the renegotiation of the loan, the IMF specifically required that the Argentine government discourage its population from using cryptocurrencies. Now, in an argument that is used by the IMF, the fight against money laundering is clearly a false pretext, since according to this study by CoinEd published in January of 2022, money laundering would represent only 0.05% of the total volume of transactions in crypto over the year 2021. While for traditional currencies, it is rather 5% of the total volume that would be in fact money laundering, or a proportion 100 times greater. So if we summarize the situation for the Argentine people, we have the Argentine peso that has lost more than 100% of its value since 2004, inflation of more than 50% by 2022, and on top of that, we have a government that is collaborating with the IMF to keep the situation going while trying to block the use under false pretense of one of the only things that could help protect Argentines from the destruction of the little value they hold. But what is very interesting is that this is not the first time the IMF has shown its hostility towards crypto, and particularly Bitcoin. In October 2021, the IMF had written a report explaining its concerns about the development of cryptocurrencies for the stability of the financial system. On January 26, the IMF had also asked El Salvador to withdraw the status of Bitcoin as an official currency, a request that fortunately remained ignored by President Nayib Bukele. And on April 29, after the Central African government announced the adoption of Bitcoin as a legal tender, the IMF also warned the Central African Republic about the risks associated with cryptos. Clearly, the IMF doesn't want to see any other country in Latin America or elsewhere adopt Bitcoin as a legal tender. So let's ask ourselves, why? Why is the IMF trying to slow down the progress of Bitcoin and cryptos? To understand this, we need to dig a little deeper into what the IMF is. Why does this institution exist? And what is its main objective? The IMF is an international finance organization created in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference, where it was decided that the dollar would become the world's reserve currency. It is an organization dominated by the United States whose mission is to ensure the stability and prosperity of the monetary system based on the dollar by offering financial aid to countries in difficulty. Except that the actions of the IMF have had dramatic consequences for the countries that have had the misfortune to call on its services. In the book, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman, written by John Perkins in 2004, it was explained how organizations like the IMF and the World Bank use private consultants like financial hitmen to implement a rather cruel strategy towards certain countries. Now, how does it work? The private consultant contacts the leader of an economically troubled country and offers him a loan from the IMF with conditions that make it unlikely that he will be able to repay it. And when the country finds itself unable to repay the debt and asks for a renegotiation, that's when the IMF takes the opportunity to impose austerity conditions on the country and a takeover of the country's natural resources and governance with even more catastrophic consequences for the country's economy. In fact, the IMF has found a business model that allows the USA to export the inflation of the US dollar, whose value is no longer backed by gold, and which is therefore created out of nothing by making loans to countries in difficulty in exchange for the enslavement and monopolization of the natural resources of these countries, which are very real. This business model allows the IMF to continue to fulfill its original mission of keeping the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Basically, it is an institution controlled by the rich countries that help ensure that inequality between the rich and the poor countries continues to accelerate in perpetuity. The IMF is destroying one by one the sovereignty of nations that are already in trouble, since the loans granted by the IMF usually end up creating a kind of medium and long-term enslavement and a feeling of despair for the population of the countries concerned. So what does all this have to do with cryptos and Bitcoin? As you probably already know, Bitcoin is intended to be a neutral and decentralized currency. That is to say, a monetary system where no one can change the rules and no one can take control. Because of its monetary characteristics and because it is probably the only cryptocurrency that cannot be stopped, Bitcoin has a significant chance of becoming a global reference currency one day, and that would disturb the main objective of the IMF. In its 2022 Global Financial Stability Report, the IMF has shown that it understands Bitcoin very well. Bitcoin allows anyone to exchange value without going through a financial institution, but also to monetize electrical energy outside the traditional financial system. Two things that are huge advantages for any supporter of individual freedom and state sovereignty, but which on the other hand are a huge problem from the point of view of the IMF, which precisely does not want to see any competitors to the monetary system already in place. In fact, Bitcoin may literally make the IMF obsolete. Bitcoin rebalances power between governments and people and gives people a lifeline from inflation, gives sovereignty back to the countries in trouble, and finally removes the IMF's business model. So it is not at all surprising that Bitcoin is becoming the IMF's sworn enemy. By the way, it is not only the IMF that is afraid of Bitcoin. A lot of other institutions, mainly the big central banks or the Bank for International Settlements and some governments, they all seem to be afraid of Bitcoin, as you can see in the screenshot. Among the people who want to see Bitcoin fall are a number of very high-profile people who understand very well what Bitcoin is and realize that Bitcoin will literally replace their businesses, work, and their ability to either print money or profit from that money printing in an unfair and immoral way. But since Bitcoin is open source software that doesn't require anyone's permission to use, Bitcoin can't be stopped. So all they can do is denigrate it, try to prevent its use, and attack it more and more openly to try to change public opinion. But in any case, the more Bitcoin is attacked by these kinds of institutions, the more it reinforces Bitcoin's value proposition, and the more it is a signal that Bitcoin is useful and winning. In the end, what did we see in this video? We saw that IMF was trying to slow down the adoption of cryptos and Bitcoin around the world by forcing governments to impose anti-crypto restrictions in certain countries like Argentina. We saw that the IMF's business model was not to bring stability and reduce poverty in the world, but rather to export the inflation of the US dollar and put already struggling countries in even more trouble, with the main consequence unfortunately being the enslavement and impoverishment of the countries that end up being under its control. We also saw why the IMF and other institutions had an interest in seeing Bitcoin fail, because if Bitcoin does not fail, it is their very existence that is at stake, since Bitcoin risks making a large part of what these institutions represent obsolete. Finally, we have seen that for populations in countries in difficulty, Bitcoin represents a sort of lifeline, a way out that could give them back their sovereignty. In fact, on May 17, in a meeting that will perhaps be seen in retrospect as a historic event, 44 representatives of financial institutions, mainly from small American and Latin American countries, met in El Salvador to discuss financial inclusion and the benefits that Bitcoin could bring to their countries. This kind of event suggests that many countries may finally be preparing to break free from the control of the IMF, and that hyper-Bitcoinization may start to accelerate very soon. Now, what do you think? Do you also think that the IMF's declared war on Bitcoin signals a fear of being rendered obsolete by a technology they cannot stop? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you like this video, please hit the like button and help me with the YouTube algorithm. Don't forget that every week new videos about cryptocurrencies are published on the Sky DeFi channel. So feel free to subscribe and press the bell for notifications. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and see you soon!